Today's episode is brought to you by Engineering.com, a globally trusted source for engineering content. Check out this and many other exclusive videos for the engineering professional found only on Engineering.com TV today. Hello everyone and welcome to the Primary Loop. I'm Jim Anderton, Multimedia Content Director here at Engineering.com, and today we're talking about manufacturing with Dave Evans, CEO of manufacturing service provider Fictiv. Dave, welcome to the Loop.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Dave, there's so much going on in especially EV manufacturing right now. You have to talk about Tesla. Everyone's talking about Tesla. They're talking about a new Gigafactory in Mexico to increase production numbers. They're talking about a new mass market, lower priced model. This company is unique in the sense that they are sticking with that almost century-old concept of vertical integration and a gigantic manufacturing footprint in one location. Now, you sort of have your finger on the pulse of manufacturing from multiple sides down here. What do you see? Is the future of manufacturing going back to like the giant operation?
Well, I got to tell you, first off, thanks for having me. I mean, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. I'm an auto guy. I came from Ford. I was building infotainment systems, dashboards of cars. So to see what's gone on in the last 10 years in the automotive sector is like unlike anything else. And so when you see what they're doing, I think they're following a very standard automotive playbook, but with a fresh slate, a way to do things that feels pretty fresh compared to, my alma mater of 100-year-old Henry Ford assembly line. So there's some new things. I know we'll get into it, some older, but really excited to be here and share some of those tips.
It's just awesome. I too come from the automotive industry. There's a couple of Fox platform Fords in my life. Used to be a Panther. I wish there was again now. I love that old iron. It's from a manufacturing perspective. We went from a world in which at one time Ford used to make the steel and the glass that went in the vehicles. It was the ultimate in vertical integration. Then we went to a point where it made more sense to spin off the Visteons and the Delphis of the world and let the manufacturers of power steering pumps specialize and do that and unlock some shareholder value. And then we went to a point in which we talked about buying in entire modules. Powertrains, corner modules. So the theory then was automotive manufacturing will be about final assembly only of very large assemblies which are made everywhere. Then came COVID, and then came a crush in supply chains. And now because of one semiconductor, F-150s are in fields by the thousands, in Kentucky, and tell me, is this sea change that we're talking about here going to big manufacturing, is this COVID derived or is this going to happen anyway?
I think that there's a couple things to unpack and peel away here. And so the first thing that I'll tell you is that there's a spectrum that all companies run. So we can take Tesla on this far end that says, I want to be vertically integrated. I actually don't want to mess around with tier ones as much. And I want to build as many things in my factory as possible. And you see them continuously bring things in. And if we go all the way to the other spectrum, I'll actually take a non-automotive company and we'll put Apple over here, which says, I just want to design it. Then I go give it to Foxconn, to some CM, and they're going to deal with all the manufacturing. And then you have a spectrum of kind of companies that are in the middle here. So I think as we look at the trend, what COVID did for us was it actually put a big disruption and exposed all the warts, all the things that were wrong in this spectrum. And so as a true engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, there's no perfect system. It's how you design with constraints into the system. And so saying whether you're Tesla over here or you're Apple, how are you going to design your supply chain for agility and resiliency to actually optimize either one of those systems? So when we see the announcements of how they're going to, reassemble this new low-cost car Tesla is, or we see them moving to Monterrey and Mexico, nearshoring, doing this, I think these are just examples of them really iterating, if you will, within the constraints of their system. I'm not sure if they're broad secular trends across all of automotive that we see. From my point of view, and the third, insight that I'll share is that for Fictiv, our job is to simplify sourcing. So we're working with all these EV companies, other classic OEMs to help take their supply chain, simplify them down with technology. And so what we see the spectrum of the most advanced, I want to be vertically integrated, all the way to the other spectrum of I just want to design and then have someone else assemble. And so I'll tell you from our point of view, it's around designing with constraints, optimizing that system is really a continuous pattern that we see.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's almost like Russian dolls. It seems to be the manufacturing supply chain. There's a very large contract manufacturer of consumer electronics based on the West Coast who shall remain nameless, but we all know who we're talking about here. And they have a nerve center that looks like mission control at Houston at NASA. And they'll do things like in real time track cargo ships, container ships moving across the Pacific, and then overlay maps, for example, of weather, and then have algorithms that calculate the risk that a shipment will arrive on time and not arrive on time, and then begin to do things like second or third source emergency stock so they could potentially be air freighted to fill in a gap. So it's like a constant shifting sort of hedging process to try and make sure that all the inputs arrive at the right place at the right time. And then logically, observing this, what occurred to me is I can see now why people would use the contract manufacturer, because that's their headache. That's a level of complexity that basically me as a cell phone manufacturer, I'm just not interested in going there. I just need to know that motherboard's going to be intact, work well, and arrive. Is there like a hedging? Is there a risk management component to this, to using contract manufacturing instead of doing it all in-house?
This was the exact insight that we saw 10 years ago when we built Fictiv. So I'm a design engineer, I'm at Ford, and I'm building all these infotainment systems, buttons, knobs, switches. And what I found was there's three ways I could get something made. I could use my internal machines owned by Ford. I could use a tier one supplier, that did all of our production work, or I could use this local network around me of, all these factories that have popped up to build things. And so in all those cases, you had downsides of, internal was always backlogged. Tier ones, not high enough volume. They want to do production, not the NPI work. The local supply was good, but you were basically just project managing phone call all the time. You talk some examples of what you had where it's like they have real-time overlay of weather, so logistics agility. So when we built Fictiv, the whole idea was how can we give you better visibility and actually on-time real manufacturing of made just in time. So we took an Uber-like model that basically said, let's find a factory that's idle, has extra capacity, and I want to allow you as an engineer or a supply chain professional to order from that machine that's available right now in Guangzhou, in Bangalore, in Monterey, in Texas, wherever, so that you are both making on time, real time, but you are also getting full visibility in a digital thread as well. And so, yes, I do think that contract manufacturers help with some of this, but they're not tech companies. They don't have software on top. You're kind of just moving, in the spectrum, your problem, if you're that company, to the contract manufacturer. And Tesla's deciding on this spectrum, well, we're going to own that problem and iterate on it. I think the reality here is, do you have a strategy that's going to put digital into your supply chain to have this overlay? Both of those spectrums we talked about can do that.
That's an interesting perspective. I know in the sort of pre-internet automotive industry that I worked in, there was a sort of a jungle telegraph that kept that maximized utilization of this equipment. If we had excess press capacity with a 500-ton unit at this point, our people would know who to call. Sometimes even our competitors, and say, we've got this amount of press availability at that tonnage. Essentially, do you need it? And the horse trading would go back and forth. And occasionally amongst the tier one and tier two community, I saw circumstances where we're making parts for competitors and vice versa. But it had that effect of sort of maximizing utility across the system in an unofficial kind of way. You're kind of talking about doing this, but doing it automatically and kind of digitally. Is this algorithm driven, or are there still going to be people out there saying, gee, I've got a 5-axis machine tool. It's going to be available for 2 weeks starting next week? I mean, how does that work?
I think that the best type of automation is human plus machine in manufacturing. There's too much variability to run a full lights out, fully automated system. We've seen that. And so this horse trading that you talked about that goes on, we went from a place of phone call to then I can email. That was what I was doing at Ford, is you're basically just trying to find capacity somewhere in those three models of internal, tier one, or local. And so what we built at Fictiv was a fully digital connected version of that. What it allows you to do is in real time, our technology are in these factories. And so I know that in Guangzhou, in China, at this factory, in machine 6, it's available. So when you need a 5-axis tight tolerance machine part in aluminum 6061, you can go make that part on demand right there. Same thing that you're running I have a need for a quick run injection molding in this resin. I need ultra, really tough material to go injection mold. Okay, here's a factory that does nothing but this, high temperature material, plastics with these ton presses in it. That type of digital visibility is what gives you true agility in your supply chain. Because let's imagine that China shuts down because of tariffs or because of COVID again, or you have a natural disaster that happens in Monterey. How are you going to move your supply chain in those cases? Are you going to go back to phone calls? Are you going to do the horse trading, the share the presses? Or do you want to leverage a digital infrastructure where people are helping manage kind of that control tower? Think about airplanes landing to actually get better visibility and true resiliency in your system. That's what I think the wave of the future is. And I think all supply chain professionals and companies are looking for a service like that.
Mm-hmm. Dave, there's so much to talk about, so little time to talk about it. One last question. Tesla is building another gigafactory in Mexico. Rumors are that it will be a purpose primarily with making a new higher volume, lower price vehicle, which means, higher production rates. At the same time, this is a company that appears to like to try and develop technology in-house and hold it tightly. Do you think that a company like Tesla, are they eventually going to reach a point where they say, you know what, it doesn't make sense to try and do everything ourselves, hold all that IP ourselves, have all that knowledge ourselves? Are they, do you think, going to centripetal forces throw them out into that kind of contract manufacturing world we're talking about?
Well, I think that what Tesla on these spectrums we talked about is, I think they engineer everything that they do. And so even if you look at how a gigafactory is built from the ground up, it's a production line. Even their factories are production lines. And so I think what Monterey represents is the ability to nearshore to one of their largest customer base, which is North America. And they are wanting to reduce any risk they have to logistical issues by being nearshored there. I think that, as you scale up to higher volumes, you need more and more leverage. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Tesla move to more of a classic automotive OEM where they're leveraging tier 1 and tier 2s in more fashion. But I think in true Elon fashion and Tesla, we're going to be surprised. That's what I would say, is there's always something you didn't see. And so with Tesla, expect a lot of engineering discipline in how they do everything, and expect surprises in how they launch as well. And, I'm really excited for how they push the automotive industry, how we've seen new companies come, new platforms, and forcing other companies to really think differently around how vehicles are manufactured. And, there's a whole ecosystem of companies helping EVs like Tesla, like a Fictiv to realize the future. So the future is bright and really exciting.
Dave Evans, CEO of Fictiv, thanks for joining me today on The Primary Loop.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching. See you next time. Well, that's it for this episode of The Primary Loop, brought to you by engineering.com. For our deeper engineering series, visit engineering.com TV for exclusive shows like Manufacturing the Future, Designing the Future, and the Engineering Roundtable, not found here on our YouTube channel. The links are in the description below. Thanks for watching.